Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world with me, Deepika, coming up in the next half an hour. French President Macron says he wants renewed dialogue with Putin. European approach in the dialogue should be there. Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu to meet US President Donald Trump with Iran's missile program high on agenda. Ahead of elections in Bangladesh, a Hindu businessman hacked to death in Memon Singh, raising fears of targeted minority violence. Good evening to all the viewers joining us at this evening broadcast. To begin with the latest, French President Emmanuel Macron has called for a renewed European-led dialogue with Russian President Vladimir Putin after years of Ukraine crisis. He spoke after dispatching a top advisor to Moscow last week in the first such meeting since Russia-Ukraine conflict. Macron said the outreach helped reopen technical-level communication channels with Russia. In an interview, Macron said his aim was to involve key European partners in any future talks with Moscow through a coordinated approach and a clear mandate, stressing that dialogue should not pressure Ukraine or rely on third parties. French President Emmanuel Macron warned that Europe should brace for more moments of US hostility and should treat what he called the Greenland moment as a wake-up call to push through long-delayed reforms to strengthen the bloc's global power. In an interview with several European newspapers, the French leader said the European Union should not mistake a lull in tensions with Washington for a lasting shift, despite a pause in US threats over Greenland, trade and technology. Macron urged European Union leaders to use a summit in a Belgian castle this week to inject fresh energy into economic reforms to bolster the bloc's competitiveness and strengthen its ability to stand up to China and the United States on the world stage. He also called on Europe to boost investment in strategic sectors or risk being swept aside in the face of competition from the United States and China. European Union leaders will meet in Brussels on Thursday for a summit to discuss ways to strengthen the European Union economy on the global stage. International outrage is growing at Israeli plans to tighten the country's grip over the West Bank. United States is the latest country to call on Israel to reverse its decision to expand control over the West Bank. A White House official reiterated US President Donald Trump's opposition towards Israel's plans for the West Bank. Officials said a stable West Bank keeps Israel secure and in line with the administration's goal to achieve peace in the region. United Kingdom and Spain also joined the rising chorus of condemnation. UK said any unilateral attempt to alter the geographic or demographic makeup of Palestine is wholly unacceptable and would be inconsistent with international law. Earlier, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and United Arab Emirates-led regional states denounced the decisions as a violation of international law that would undermine the vision of a two-state solution as well as stability in the region. They said the moves meant to entrench Israeli settlement of the West Bank, displacing Palestinians and imposing unlawful Israeli sovereignty there. A UN spokesperson said that UN Chief Guterres warned that the current trajectory on the ground is eroding the prospect for two-state solution. Take a listen.
Such actions, including Israel's continuing presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, are not only destabilizing, but, as recalled by the International Court of Justice, unlawful. The Secretary General calls on Israel to reverse these measures and all parties to preserve the only path to lasting peace, which is a negotiated settlement for a two-state solution in line with relevant Security Council resolutions and international law.
Israel has approved plans to help settlers acquire land in the West Bank and widen its powers in parts of the territory where Palestinians have some self-rule. It was announced by Israel's finance minister and defense minister after being approved by the Security Cabinet. It was unclear when the new rules would take effect, but they do not require further approval. The West Bank, which Israel has occupied since 1967, would form the largest part of any future Palestinian state.
Jordanian law, which has been on the books since before 1967, but has been strengthened since 1967, prohibits the sale of any land to Jews, which is something very discriminatory by any standard in any society.
The Israeli measures also envisage transferring authority over building permits for settlements in the Palestinian city of Hebron, the West Bank's largest, from the Palestinian Authority to Israel. In addition, the reform strengthens Israeli control over two major religious sites in the southern West Bank, Rachel's tomb near Bethlehem and the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron. And moving on, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday the top priority in his talks with the US President would be the ongoing negotiations with Iran as he presses for a tougher US approach to Tehran's ballistic missile program. So far, Iran has rejected expanding the scope of its talks with the US beyond the issue of its nuclear program, though Washington also wants Tehran's ballistic missile program and its support for regional militant groups on the table. The two leaders are to meet in Washington on Wednesday, their sixth such encounter in the United States since Trump returned to the office a year ago. Wednesday's meeting comes days after arch foes Iran and the United States held talks in Oman, after which Trump said another round of negotiations would follow.
On this trip, we will discuss a range of issues, Gaza, the region, but of course, first and foremost, the negotiation with Iran. I will present to the President our views regarding the principle for the negotiation, the important principles which in my view are important not only for Israel but for everyone in the world who seeks peace and security in the Middle East.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer chaired a cabinet meeting on Tuesday after surviving renewed calls for his resignation from members of his own party. Starmer refused to heed calls to quit, pledging to fight on after his appointment of Peter Mandelson as the US ambassador plunged his government into crisis. This came just a day after his chief of staff resigned in the aftermath of the scandal. Earlier, Anas Sarwar called for Starmer's resignation amid the ongoing row over the appointment of Mandelson. Despite his intervention, Starmer later received messages of support from his top ministers and a positive reception at a meeting of Labour Party lawmakers suggested that there would be no imminent move to oust him. Advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Larijani visited Oman on Tuesday following indirect US-Iranian talks in Muscat on Friday in an effort to revive diplomacy after US President Donald Trump positioned a naval flotilla in the region, raising fears of new military action. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Friday that nuclear talks with the US, in which each delegation spoke separately with leaders from Oman, began positively and were set to continue. Iran has vowed a harsh response to any strike and has cautioned neighboring countries which host US bases that they could be in the firing line if they were involved in an attack. Europe's strive to tackle corruption appears to be losing momentum. Now, that is according to the 2025 Corruption Perceptions Index released today by Transparency International. For more, we are joined by DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu in Berlin. Good evening, Chiponda. Where are we seeing Europe's anti-corruption efforts stall?
Thanks for having me. Well, according to Transparency International, the big one was the European Union's anti-corruption directive, which was reached last December. Now, while that should have been a zero-tolerance framework to fight corruption, it was watered down. And that was partly because Italy blocked the criminalization of public officials' abuse of office. Now, Europe has worsened in the corruption perception index over the last 10 years. More countries have slipped than improved. And that includes the bloc's two biggest nations, Germany and France. Now, in France, there are growing risks of collusion between officials and and private interest. That is what Transparency International says. And that is despite the landmark conviction of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy last year. Now, he was convicted for receiving illicit funds also from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi and using them for his campaign for the presidency. And in Europe, it is the United Kingdom, which left the European Union in 2020, which had the largest drop. And that was because of ongoing failures to enforce ethical standards for ministers, lawmakers, and other government officials.
Also tell us what is driving this worrying trend, Chiponda.
Europe is confronting overlapping challenges. So it could be that European governments have taken their eyes off the ball when it comes to fighting corruption. Now, Transparency International says there have been efforts to loosen anti-corruption rules, checks and balances. And on top of that, there have also been state attacks on civil society, independent media, and whistleblowers. And that is what is increasing corruption in Europe because, of course, these conditions have made it harder to detect and expose corruption. And there, Transparency International points to Hungary and Slovakia as examples. And meanwhile, here in Western Europe, it is countries like France and the United Kingdom where there have been more corruption scandals in politics, which show that there may be more collusion between government officials and private interests. Now, that is why the perception of corruption in Europe has increased. And Transparency International's latest report also shows that the situation has worsened in 13 countries and only 7 European countries have made improvements.
So what should we expect from European governments going forward?
Despite Sterling, it is worth pointing out that Europe still scores better than any other region in the world when it comes to transparency. So while the perception of corruption may be on the rise, the fact is that it isn't as bad here as it is elsewhere. But the worrying trend may be that even Europe, which has been a positive example for fighting against corruption, standards may be slipping. And as Transparency International says, corruption risks have increased because independent checks and balances have been weakened. And there are also gaps in legislation. Now, that trend in Europe goes to show that even countries with robust systems may be vulnerable. And given all the challenges that Europe is dealing with right now, the war in Ukraine, a rift in relations with the United States, a sluggish economy, an aging population, to name but a few, it is hard to imagine that fighting corruption will be top of the agenda for politicians.
All right. Thank you so much, Chiponda, for joining us and getting us the latest on this. Moving on. Meta Platforms Unit, WhatsApp's legal battle against the European Union's privacy watchdog, has been sent back to a lower tribunal following a ruling by the Court of Justice of the European Union on Tuesday. The dispute stems from a 5-year tussle over a $268 million fine linked to WhatsApp's data practices. The case began after the European Data Protection Board directed Ireland's Data Protection Commission to increase a penalty imposed on WhatsApp in 2021. Although Meta appealed, a lower tribunal had earlier dismissed the challenge, citing lack of legal standing. The CJEU has now overturned that view, asking the tribunal to examine the case on its merits. WhatsApp welcomed the ruling, while Ireland's regulator continues to face multiple legal challenges, delaying fine collections. A landmark trial in the United States is putting the spotlight on the role of social media in children's mental health. In California, Meta and Google-owned YouTube are facing serious allegations that their platforms were deliberately designed to addict young users. The outcome of the case could have far-reaching consequences for big tech and for families, raising concerns about the impact of social media on children. Here's a report by DD India's Harshita Oberoi. Take a look.
A landmark trial in California began on Monday, examining whether Instagram and YouTube harmed children's mental health through intentionally addictive designs. A lawyer for a 20-year-old woman identified as Kaylee GM told jurors that she became hooked on social media at a young age due to deliberate product design choices. Kaylee is suing Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and Google, which owns YouTube. Kaylee's lawyer, Mark Lanier, accused Meta and YouTube of deliberately creating what he described as addiction machines aimed at children. Lanier told jurors that these platforms were not accidental products of innovation, but systems carefully engineered to keep young users engaged for as long as possible. Both Meta and YouTube have denied the allegations. Meta countered and said that evidence suggested Kaylee's struggles stemmed from family problems and real-world bullying affecting her self-esteem. Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg is expected to be on the stand next week. The case is being treated as a bellwether proceeding because its outcome could set the tone for a tidal wave of similar litigation across the United States. Lawyers for YouTube are to present the opening remarks to the jury on Tuesday. Snapchat and TikTok were named as defendants in the suit, but struck settlement deals before the start of the trial. Harshita Oberoi for DD India.
Time to take a quick and short break, but still to come on the other side. Union Home Minister Amit Shah participates in two-day national conference on tackling cyber-enabled frauds and dismantling the ecosystem. Niti Aayog launches various study reports on the theme Developed India and Scenarios Towards Net Zero. And at the ongoing T20 Cricket World Cup, Netherlands beat Namibia by 7 wickets.
On defense dynamics, India fires a message the world can't ignore. Agni 3, the strategic signaling to China and Pakistan. Why AMCA, India's 6th generation fighter, must be built by private players. Winning the low sky inside the Indian Army's radar reset. As middle powers rise, the arms market becomes a battlefield. And in my take, Pakistan's collapse and shock ahead. For all this and much more, tune in this Wednesday at 8 PM IST only on DD India.
Welcome back. After that short break, you're watching DD India Live. Russia has said it will actively support India's chairmanship of BRICS, describing New Delhi's agenda as modern and highly relevant, with a strong focus on counter-terrorism and energy security. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that India, that assumed the chair on 1st of January this year, is prioritizing issues that address current global challenges while preparing for the future. In an interview with TV BRICS, he highlighted the relevance of counter-terrorism amid persistent threats in the region. Lavrov said Russia is working closely with India at the United Nations on a global convention, adding that BRICS members support transparency while safeguarding national sovereignty. The Government of India, in partnership with the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, organized the second edition of the Annual Capacity Building Programme on the UN Security Council Resolution 1540 and Strategic Trade Controls for Asia, Pacific and African countries at the National Academy of Customs, Indirect Taxes and Narcotics in New Delhi. The three-day event will witness participation of 23 government experts from 9 countries, that includes Brunei, Darussalam, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Mauritius, Mongolia, Namibia, Nigeria, Tanzania and Vietnam. This annual flagship program is a reaffirmation of India's commitment to global non-proliferation architecture. Ministry of External Affairs Secretary of West, Ambassador C.P. George, held 11th round of India-Hungary Foreign Office consultations with Hungarian State Secretary. They reviewed the entire spectrum of engagement, including political affairs, trade and investment, defense, science and tech, among others. Leaders also discussed regional and global issues of mutual interest, including on Europe, Indo-Pacific and multilateral reforms. Union Home Minister Amit Shah participated in the two-day national conference on tackling cyber-enabled frauds and dismantling the ecosystem in New Delhi today. The conference was organized by the Central Bureau of Investigation in collaboration with the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Centre, Ministry of Home Affairs. The Home Minister presided over an investiture ceremony of CBI officers and also inaugurated the new cybercrime branch of CBI and launched S4C Dashboard of 14C MHA. It is being convened at a time when, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India's rapid digital transformation has significantly improved access to banking, governance and communication, while simultaneously creating new vulnerabilities that are being exploited by cyber criminal networks. Niti Aayog on Tuesday launched various study reports on the theme Developed India and Scenarios Towards Net Zero in New Delhi. Sectoral insights reports based on scenarios for achieving net zero targets for key sectors such as transport, industry and power were released. Chief Executive Officer of Niti Aayog, BVR Subramaniam, emphasized the need for a coordinated and long-term strategy to achieve India's net zero goals. In Bangladesh, a Hindu businessman was hacked to death inside his own shop in Mymensing's Trishul Upazila late on Monday night, with several lakh taka reportedly looted. In an incident that has now intensified concerns over law and order and the safety of minorities ahead of Bangladesh's national elections. The victim, identified as Sushen Chandra Sarkar, aged 62 years, a rice trader, was killed at around 11 p.m. local time at his business establishment at the Bogar Bazaar intersection. According to police and family members, unidentified assailants attacked Sarkar with sharp weapons, hacking him on the head before leaving him bleeding inside the shop. The attackers reportedly pulled down the shop's shutter and fled the scene after looting cash. Family members later found him in a pool of blood and rushed him to Medical College Hospital, where doctors declared him dead on arrival. The killing comes at a sensitive time as Bangladesh heads towards the parliamentary elections amid mounting reports of violence and intimidation. Rights groups and observers have raised repeated concerns about the safety of vulnerable communities, particularly religious minorities, under the Yunus-led interim administration, warning that such incidents risk deepening fear and insecurity in the run-up to the polls. Moving on now, let's get you all the latest from the world of sports, to begin with cricket. Pakistan will face India in the upcoming T20 Cricket World Cup clash after previously announcing they would boycott the match on the 15th of February in Colombo. Their decision to reverse the boycott of their T20 Cricket World Cup tie with India came after the game's governing body, ICC, made a series of concessions to Bangladesh. Here's a report.
The conundrum surrounding India's T20 World Cup match against Pakistan, scheduled for February 15 in Colombo, has finally been cleared after Pakistan Cricket Board reversed its decision to boycott their World Cup match against India. PCB and ICC on late Monday night confirmed the same, saying the government of Pakistan has decided to end their boycott. The two neighbors were supposed to play their group stage match in Sri Lanka. However, Pakistan announced their decision to boycott the match in Colombo in solidarity with Bangladesh, who were replaced with Scotland in the tournament by ICC last month, following Bangladesh's refusal to travel to co-host India. Bangladesh's refusal to play its matches in India came after BCCI instructed Kolkata Knight Riders to release pacer Mustafizur Rahman for the upcoming IPL season. Backdoor negotiations, calls and meetings followed, culminating in the ICC officials' arrival in Pakistan last weekend. The talks, held in consultation with ICC Chief Jai Shah, resulted in the Bangladesh Cricket Board urging the Pakistan Cricket Board to take the field against India, resulting in the Pakistan government changing its stance. The Sri Lankan Cricket Board also urged its Pakistani counterpart to reconsider its decision, citing significant financial losses for all parties involved. In terms of its discussion with BCB, the ICC said it would continue to facilitate the growth of the game in Bangladesh, so that the team's ouster from the T20 World Cup does not have any long-term effects on cricket in the country. Simultaneously, the ICC announced that no financial, sporting or administrative penalty will be imposed on Bangladesh. The ICC also added that an agreement has been reached that Bangladesh will host an ICC event prior to the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup 2031. The India-Pakistan fixture, which attracts huge television audiences, underpins the ICC's $4.4 billion Indian broadcast deal, with rights to World Cup sold on the understanding that they will meet at least once. If the match had not taken place, there could have been significant financial repercussions. Sports Desk, DD India.
The Netherlands kept their Super 8 hopes alive with a convincing 7-wicket victory over Namibia at the Arun Jaitley Stadium in New Delhi at the ongoing T20 Cricket World Cup. All-rounder Basilid led the charge with a standout performance. Batting first, Namibia struggled to build momentum as wickets fell regularly after a cautious power play. J-Nicole Lofty-Eaton's 42 of 38 balls provided some resistance, helping them post 156. But skipper Gerhard admitted middle-over setbacks that hurt their plans. In response, Dutch lost Maksud Dawood early but recovered smoothly. Lead anchored the chase with an unbeaten 72 of 48 balls, supported by a brisk 32 from Colin Ackerman, sealing a comfortable victory after their recent loss to Pakistan. The victory also made the Netherlands most successful associate nation in T20 Cricket World Cup's history, moving them ahead of Scotland with Afghanistan and Namibia tied next. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download it right now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Deepika, and from all of us here in New Delhi, thank you so much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.